This is Drinks Presents Wine Online 101, a 10-part series for wineries to tackle an entirely new approach to expanding their business online. I'm Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Electriq, a customer experience e-com agency, and I'm joined with Zach Brandenberg, CEO of our parent company, Drinks, the leading online wine platform.
Hey, Brandon, it's great to spend this time with you.
I'm excited to dive in here. So before we go into things, can you just give everybody sort of a lay of the land on what this series is going to be about and focused on?
Sure. So first, to frame up, Drinks is a technology company focused on really building a new operating system for online alcohol. And when we think about why does an industry require a new operating system, it's helpful to understand how it got to where it is today. And alcohol in general, when you think about it, so beverage alcohol covers wine, distilled spirits, and beer malt, is an industry governed really out of the laws of prohibition back in the 1930s. And that's led to a system in place in the United States that's created tremendous impediments for beverage alcohol producers, so wineries and distilleries and beer manufacturers, for them to be able to bring their product into market in as seamless and convenient a way as most of the products are brought to consumers today. So for example, today, in many cases, you can buy an automobile directly from the manufacturer, can engage directly with Tesla, for example. And many other products are brought direct to consumer, which enables the manufacturers to be able to communicate directly with consumer, collect information, build a relationship, and create higher elements of convenience, and also create a more lucrative margin structure for them. Beverage alcohol, however, is an industry where that's highly limited because of the systems that have been put in place over the last 70 to 80 years. And Drinks has approached the industry with the line of sight that really there's a better way for beverage alcohol products to be sold to consumers, a better way for consumers to engage and buy those products. And we've been building the technology and therefore the tool set that enables marketers, retailers, and now producers, i.e. wineries, to be able to better bring their products into market.
Got it. That's awesome. I'm excited to continue to dive into that here. So I think one of the key things that I want to touch on is how the wine industry has been lagging behind and what are some of the key reasons that has happened. Because if you look at consumer experiences online with any other industry, you're looking at things like, and even to be like feature specific, you're looking at accelerated checkouts with something like an Apple Pay or a Shop Pay. If you were to go and shop online at any winery site, I would almost guarantee you that there's no such thing as that. That's just one example of sort of a broader problem that I've noticed where the wine industry feels like, from an e-commerce standpoint, it's maybe 20, 30 years behind where it could be and should be based off of the technology and tools that are available to it.
I would agree with you, if not more than that. This is an industry that has really lagged in its ability to adopt technology and be innovative. And that really is across, every methodology or every function that beverage alcohol merchants or producers take part in or engage with. And by that, what I mean is this lack of embrace of technology doesn't just manifest itself in their lack of websites and aggressiveness towards engaging with consumers online. It reflects itself in how they've done business, even in the B2B market, how they do business within other tiers. Alcohol is based on a tier system, 3-tier system of producers, distributors, and retailers. And the fact that things have been done the same way for a very long time. Now, a unique aspect of beverage alcohol and direct to consumer, and let's talk about wineries specifically for the purpose of this conversation, is that the market didn't really open up. The opportunity didn't really manifest itself until 2004, 2005, coming out of a Supreme Court decision called Granholm that enabled wineries, or really set the stage for wineries to begin to ship and therefore sell to consumers out of their state. And that established the beginning of a framework that meant that wineries could be more aggressive in getting their products to market instead of going through the existing 3-tier system. And the 3-tier system, again, when I mentioned producers, distributors, and retailers, is you're a producer like a Gallo, make your wine, whether it's Apothic or Dark Horse or another one of the many properties that they manage, you're going to sell that wine to a distributor / a wholesaler that's going to be responsible for selling it to a retailer. And that happens on a state by state basis, in some cases, even on a more localized basis. And that really was the method that most of the beverage alcohol industry looks at to bring their product into the market. The opportunity for going D2C has really expanded, but the adoption based on the understanding of technology really hasn't come along at the same accelerated rate.
And I think the wineries that have been trying to push the needle forward on the direct consumer side of things have seen it pay off in retail through their traditional distribution channels as well. It's not like direct to consumer is a replacement for what is already there. It's additive. And for customers,
Absolutely.
You want to be able to have that sort of tied experience in both channels.
It's a great way to accelerate your retail activity. It's also a great way to collect information so that you can bring the product, you can bring into broad market, you can bring into retail a product where you've been able to experiment on it and hone in on it and then be more successful in a retail environment. I mean, most originally native D2C businesses that have gained true success may have started online, but have created promotions and integrations where their product is available outside of just a digital only environment. And that sort of omni-channel approach to marketing and retail is what's critically important for anyone who wants to have success.
Yeah, and especially when you're a winery, if you're selling through retail only, you're on a shelf with hundreds of other wines, and it really comes down to label and what sort of like education the customer is able to get in that buying process within the store, which is so much more limited than what you're able to do and curate in an online environment. And I think that educational component is very important for wineries when they all have their own unique way that the wine actually gets into the bottle. Which is something
that's
really
absolutely right. I mean, you tell your story much better online and in a much more direct manner when you engage. But to a comment you just made there about what happens in our brick and mortar or retail environment, it's not just that the product is on a shelf. It's that you as the producer really have no control over where on the shelf your product is. So of course you're going to be next to hundreds, if not thousands of other SKUs, but you really don't have control over where. Are you going to get line of sight? Are you going to get attention? Or is your product going to be buried up there on the upper right next to something that's completely irrelevant and is not going to draw the attention of the consumer to it? And that's certainly a problem for producers, wineries who are not, the number one or number two players out there. If you're a bigger corporation, and I would think about a bigger corporation in the wine industry like a Gallo or Constellation Brands, you're going to have a wide portfolio and you're going to have more leverage to be able to ensure successful placement in more and more shelves, in more and more doors, and to get the exposure you want. If you're not of that size, you don't necessarily have the same leverage. And so you need to develop different techniques to be able to get your product in front of a consumer and obtain the value that you can extract from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a smaller winery and you start to build out with like a tasting room business and like an integrated sort of tasting room POS with your online storefront, that's where you really get to build the demand generation and start to curate these customer relationships. Then you can take that sort of firepower that you have into the distributors and into retail versus the other way around, which is trying to sort of claw at a very concentrated store shelf that's already there and then not knowing anything about your customers whatsoever. And so for me, like, not that I would ever do this, but if I decided to go start a winery, I would 100% go the tasting room D2C first. And then from there, how do I get into retail versus going retail first and then trying to get into online? So I think this is going to be like really, really, really critical and game changing for wineries that are not like a Gallo or a Constellation, because they're going to be able to have more power and have more of that relationship with the customer.
Yes, that's exactly correct. I mean, what you're also going to be able to do, what a winery is also able to do when they sell online, is they can break into market areas not just because of the limitations of what they can access on a store shelf, but they can break into market areas where prohibition era laws, again, we're going back to the 30s and Al Capone days, where prohibition laws create limited opportunity for them to get onto store shelves. There are states such as Pennsylvania, which have a control system. The state runs, essentially the state runs what is going to go into the stores that the state then subsequently operates. And, this creates a binary situation for many producers where you're either in or you're out. It's not like you have a variety of other options. And as you look across the country, particularly in the upper Northeast, really going through the South and I guess the central southern part of the United States, it's much more Wild West in California. You have market areas where wineries who are able to engage in direct to consumers, through websites, engage with consumers are going to be much more successful and be able to reach a larger portion of the population than even if they were in broad market retail distribution.
And I think there's a risk as well, not only for the industry, but for the wineries specifically that aren't willing to innovate and start to dip their toes in direct to consumer and start to create these online experiences. And I think there's industry threat, but there's also like winery threat themselves, because there's no doubt going to be some winners and losers in the winery ecosystem itself from this acceleration of e-commerce adoption. But then at an industry level, you're looking at increasing competition from other forms of consumption as well. And then having to deal with that, I think there's some risk there too if wine is not able to sort of keep up with on the e-commerce front. Like, for example, CBD has started to come more and more to the forefront of e-commerce.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, you have pressure from all different places. I mean, you have pressure for the producers, from new producers. You have pressure from products and trends that are impacting what they're trying to sell, whether it's CBD drinks, whether it's low alcohol drinks, whether it's low to no alcohol drinks. Outside of CBD alone, there are threats to wineries from other cannabis-based beverages, and you have a changing ecosystem where there's going to be more demand as laws change for limited spaces on a shelf, and a greater need for wineries to be able to meet consumers where they are. Not just meet consumers in general and find consumers that are interested in their wine, but to be able to meet them, in fact, where they want to shop and where they want to engage, which may very well not be and isn't for many people in a traditional retail environment.
And why do you think the wineries really haven't bridged the gap yet to an expansive e-commerce presence?
Well, there's lots of different reasons there. We do love our beverage alcohol puns, and so common expression there is the wineries and really the adult beverage industry is really underserved by the technology solutions that have been out there. Not just the solutions, but the solution providers. It's really striking to me, especially coming from a technology background where, for many, many years, I work with a variety of different businesses to help bring them online or help them find new customers online, that this industry is so limited in what it's done online and the tools that have been utilized. I think that that's going to change, and I think we're driving that change forward for sure. But there's an enormous market opportunity. I mean, you have holistically a giant category here. Adult beverages about $250 billion of sales in the United States, and yet even with growth for direct consumer really driven by wineries more than distilleries or more than beer manufacturers, the percentage that's sold online is still very small, growing rapidly, but still very small. As more tools and platforms are enabled or brought to bear for wineries, I think you're going to see those numbers grow. Maybe a couple of years ago, certainly not to you and I, but maybe a couple of years ago, there were people who doubted the interest of consumers in engaging with wineries and shopping online and buying online and having product delivered to their door. I think it's become really clear to everybody, even those that were naysayers back then, that the consumer wants an experience with as little friction as possible. They want to experience with as much convenience as possible. And hey, if they can get the best price too, fantastic.
And I think it's been so sort of jarring for me, having been in the Shopify ecosystem for the last 4 years, and then talking to the wineries and some of the issues that they have on a day-to-day basis, because like with the Shopify ecosystem, there's so much investment in that platform from other third-party like marketing tools. Like if you start an e-commerce enablement platform or an app or whatever it may be, you're building for Shopify first and foremost. And so there's literally, I think it's like 8,000 or 9,000 one-click integrations at this point. So as an agency, there's quite literally not a whole lot that needs to be custom developed. You want to get up and running with email and SMS marketing, great. There's a one-click integration for that. You want dynamic product recommendations and upsells in the checkout process, great. There's an app for that. There's no shortage of ways and tools that we can be enabled with to start to create these customer experiences, aggregate data, start to build out a retention strategy. And when talking with wineries, everything is custom for an industry that isn't necessarily stacked with development resources either. So if you want to do email marketing with your wine platform, it's a custom integration. And then now you have to maintain that. And there's no enablement or resources around what you should even be doing with this email marketing platform. It really is crazy for me, having come from what I've looked at as like the #1 e-commerce platform in the world, to now the reality of what it looks like when you are not on a platform and you're on these more like one-to-one solutions or custom integrations. It is very limiting.
Yeah, I agree with you, very limiting. And it's crazy for me as well. I mean, what we saw of this, and really from our direct experience, is that one of the key impediments historically has been the complexity of beverage alcohol, which you'd speak about in that high level manner, but really comes down to compliance regulations, what can be sold where, and the associated tax construct of what can be sold where and how it has to be taxed, tied with licenses and all these granular details. And because of the complexity, beverage alcohol is a product category that sort of sits over here. It sits over here at retail, meaning it's dealt with that in a different way with the largest retailers in the world. It sits over here when it comes to technology enablers, where I don't know if it's a regulated product, can we build a support system around it? Can we enable the same communication methodologies? Can we offer our merchants the same thing? And that's going to change. I mean, historically, you have solutions providers who have come in and attempted to create platforms for wineries that also solve for some of these regulatory challenges. What you're to see, and one of the things we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes, is the ability to now take industry-leading compliance services and embed those compliance services with an industry-leading technology platform, so that wineries can now take advantage of the best of both worlds.
I think that is always been our fundamental approach as an agency to everything that we do, is we work with the best-in-class provider of each specific function, and then they all integrate with one another. So even little things like, which quiz builder are we going to use? Well, there's a best-in-class one for that. And by the way, it also integrates with your email tool, and it integrates with your reviews platform. And so your data on customers is everywhere. And that's extremely important to be able to create those personalized like retention strategies versus, hey, everybody gets the same experience no matter what. That is very much so 10 years ago. That is not the reality of how consumers are expecting to be communicated with digitally. And so being able to provide that to wineries, and I think there's so many cool applications that I've already been thinking through that I'm really excited to enable, because of the fact that there's so much nuance and education in wine that you maybe don't see with other products. Like we have clients that, I don't know, you sell granola or you sell coffee, and sure, there's nuance and there's some education, but there's nothing like how complex the wine industry is in terms of the varietal and the terroir and everything else that's going on there. And
there's so much content that you can work with, right?
Yeah. endless amount of content.
Endless
Like,
content.
I don't even think there's probably been a live shopping wine event outside of like a QVC ever done on an e-commerce platform. Like, has there been? And I think that'd be really cool. Though the winemaker comes on, he broadcasts to thousands of potential customers. Maybe they even bring on a chef and they go through a pairing, and then everything is shoppable right within the live shopping event. That is something that I can almost guarantee would not be a one-click, let's get up and running with the current model.
No, I would agree with that. That's not something you see on an everyday basis for sure. But I mean, you have all the characteristics that are going to make that successful. The content, which we just spoke about, the fact that, you know, wine is basically a passion product. Consumers feel very strongly about it. They emotionally connect with it. I mean, consumer data and research would tell you that your emotional reaction to what you see is really critically important in picking what you buy. And these are elements that make this a product where you can really go deep online, because you can build out an experience. And it's not just about, you know, what's written on a page so simply, or what might show up in, say, a more traditional marketing campaign or more traditional marketing technique. You're trying to bring the feeling that you might get if you're wandering the roads in Central California or Northern California, up in Napa, Sonoma, walk into a winery, trying to bring that full experience, that people feel so strongly about and are so convinced to immediately sign up for a list or to buy a case and take it home because it tastes so good at the winery. You're trying to bring that into the consumer's house. And you can do that if you're taking advantage of the technology enablement solutions that are out there.
And that content is why I don't join any clubs, just sort of fundamentally, except for wine clubs, because there's real like value and content that can be provided there. And the connection feels much deeper, even though it might be completely superficial and not real. But when I'm receiving a letter from the two founders of the winery in California that I really enjoy, with my annual club shipment, and then like exclusive access to potential like limited drops of a certain SKU, there's like 1,000 different ways and reasons why online makes sense for a brand. Because even if I'm purchasing online still, but from like a Vinfolio or even a wine.com, I don't feel as connected to the brand as I do when I purchase directly from the winery itself.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. The wineries have a much better opportunity, or I mean, really, any producer of a product, going direct to that source, you're going to get more of the history. You're going to get a better feeling of what the brand means, of what they're doing, and what their passion is. And again, with wine, this is a passion product. Producers are putting their heart and soul into making their wine for consumers to enjoy, and getting the consumer as close as possible to the producer is critically important to be able to build that relationship, create that loyalty, not only which then manifests itself in, you know, direct to consumer sales and engagement, but now you have an advocate. So winery, you now have an advocate for your products, or your family, or your winery at large, that's out there sharing how wonderful your wine is. They're seeing it, they're recognizing it at restaurants, or seeing it on retail shelves. You really have the capacity to expand or amplify the benefit of that one-to-one consumer engagement, because you're creating that relationship. If you're ignoring the opportunity for that, if you're not getting into D2C, or you're not doing it successfully, you're going to give up that to everybody else who is going to be a participant.
The advocate thing is interesting, because last week I was talking to a winery about their referral program, because it looks really nice on the front end, like it's a points-based system. But then we started talking through the actual management that they have to do around it. And apparently every referral gets sent, there's a one-to-one email logged to their back-end team that has to go manually update it and basically keep a ledger in a spreadsheet of this program, which is just so representative of why I think being able to use a platform that has these robust integrations. I mean, I could see having anywhere from 5, maybe even 10% or more of your revenue as a winery online getting driven from referrals. And you want that to be actually like scalable solution that's tracked and just automatically logged into your e-commerce platform, not something that you have to take care of manually and is a complete headache and burden on like your back-end administration team. So even little things like that, super excited to start to work with them on. But also you don't need to like get everything all at once. I feel like there's some really simple baby steps that can be taken to bridge this gap between where things are now and where they should be. Because you also, and we even talk about this with our clients who aren't in the wine industry, you don't want to just start throwing stuff up on the board and then not have the resources to follow through with it or back it up. Because I'd say there's 15 apps that we use across the board with all of our clients, but there's only 4, maybe 5 that I'd say are table stakes and that we start with to begin with. And then depending on where the brand is at in terms of their growth, but also a myriad of other factors, that's when we start to layer in some of these other things. Because if you just get up and running with all 15 and you don't actually know what you want to do with any of them, you end up with a very expensive tech stack that doesn't actually provide any value to your customers, and a very confusing messaging strategy too. If you have all of these different things and bells and whistles on your site, but no real thought behind how to actually enable it. So I think there's a happy medium where you don't try to do everything all at once, but you also don't sit there and do nothing, because you will get passed by. Take some incremental steps to get to where you know you need to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It reminds me of a conversation you and I had with a winery a few weeks ago about the concept of, where they wanted to be. Where they wanted to be was much further down the road with all the bells and whistles. But what really needed to happen to begin with is, let's just get going online. Let's get best in class tech as the underpinning. Let's solve for any other regulatory complexity. And then let's layer in the first sets of tools for your CRM techniques before we get into all of the complexity that you can then play with once you get going. I mean, the sky's the limit, but you got to get out of the gate.
Yeah, it's important not to completely overwhelm your team either with 1,000 different things that you want to do. So I think there's definitely some small actionable steps that can be taken for them. But this was great. I think episode 1 has laid the foundation for the next ones to come. So hopefully everybody listening found some value to this. I just wanted to quickly wrap up sort of what we've chatted about here, some of the things that we're going to be chatting about moving forward as well. But in this session, we primarily focused on just the overall shift that the wine industry really needs to take in order to keep up with the current times. We talked about competition, not only intro winery, but also more industry specific. Consumers are expecting these shopping experiences that they get when they buy shoes to translate over to when they buy wine, whether it's accelerated payment methods, quiz funnels, whatever it may be. That is now the expectation when people shop online. So as a takeaway, what are 3 things that are in the way of you as a winery from growing your online wine business? We're going to aggregate a list. We'll provide an email for you to email it to, so that you can email over those 3 things, and then we'll respond and start to chat through those on some further episodes, and even sync with you one-to-one if that's something that you want to do, to chat through some of the challenges that you've been having as a winery getting enabled online. But with that, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.